Maldivian President Mohammed Muizzu was in India recently to take part in the swearing-in ceremony of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He sat next to PM Modi all through the official dinner, suggesting that ties between the two countries were going strong. The hope was short-lived. A parliamentary committee in Maldives on Monday, which has oversight on the security forces, set up an inquiry committee to look into 4 agreements made with India under President Ibrahim Solih leadership when and before Muizzu came to power. The committee termed these agreements as a threat to the sovereignty and independence of the Maldives. The proposal to review all agreements signed between Maldives and India under President Solih's administration were made by Ahmad Azaan. He's an MP, a member of the parliament in Maldives. His views do not necessarily conform to those of the government, but these are important developments. The agreements between India and Maldives that will be reviewed include the hydrography agreement, the Uthuru Thilafalu agreement, which is a dockyard being built with grant assistance from India, and the Dornier aircraft gifted by India to the Maldives Defence Forces for humanitarian search and rescue operation. Now, Ahmad Azaan, the parliamentarian who made the proposal, later said that India remained a closest neighbour and a steadfast ally. And he also said, and I quote, "Under President Muizzu's leadership, we are demonstrating strong bilateral relationships which can flourish, preserving our sovereignty and independence." But how do we really read into these developments, and what do they really mean for India and Maldivian ties? Let's discuss that. Joining me in the studio is my colleague Aditya Rajkol. Aditya, hi, good evening. What do we really make of Maldives reviewing these agreements with India? It did look like about 24 hours ago that the relationships are going in the right direction, but it feels like it's all back to square one.
Well, that's right, Shweta. You know, the question really is, the timing is under question. You know, this could have happened before, this could have happened after, but this happens at a time when a grand welcome was given to the Maldives president in New Delhi. This happened at a time when at the presidential banquet, you had the president sitting next to the prime minister. You had the president of Maldives given all the kind of grand welcome at the Rashtrapati Bhavan yesterday evening, where the swearing-in ceremony was happening. So this was an olive branch from India. This was a positive kind of move, a kind of respect that was given to the top leader from Maldives. But what we get in return is an insult, is the Modi government being backstabbed really diplomatically, if stated. The domestic politics of Maldives currently is certainly in favor of the party that the president of Maldives comes from, and that's why they are trying to review their bilateral ties with India and several other countries. But India is significant and important because traditionally and strategically India has been a very close ally of Maldives. We have come to their aid, and as many local Maldivian leaders explain, India is Maldives' 911 call, and that means if there is
on
a
the
humanitarian
emergency
disaster,
dial list.
yes, if there is any kind of humanitarian disaster, natural disaster, or if Maldives is in need in emergency of anything, the first number they dial is of New Delhi. And New Delhi has never refused them. There was a water crisis that happened in Maldives and India came to the rescue. For the local people of Maldives, there was a Dornier aircraft that was gifted to them, that was operated by the Indian soldiers. But when President Muizzu actually came to power, he requested New Delhi to remove the Indian soldiers from there and replace them with civilians.
Which is what India did.
India did immediately, because India did not have any kind of hidden interest. We were not spying like some other countries in the region that do. And of course, what has happened in the last 6 to 7 months is that the current government of Maldives is very close to China. And the big dragon in the room, the Chinese, are trying to influence political decisions of the Maldivian government. They are clearly indicating that there will be a defense and strategic relationship more with China in the coming days. I won't be surprised if the Maldives government actually replaces the Dornier aircraft with a Chinese aircraft. There could be Chinese soldiers on the ground. There could be Chinese espionage happening with the signature of the Maldives president really. And of course, he's in Islamist in tendency, so he has links with Turkey. He has drone agreement with Turkey and many other such links. But the question really is that will an autocratic China replace a democratic secular India, which has always come to the rescue of Maldives? What is in the best interests of the people in Malé, in Maldives?
Right,
and
absolutely.
people of Maldives have always stood with India as well. Let's face that. But in the last 6 to 8 months, and it started also not just by the Get Out India campaign of the current Maldives government, but also the tourism that happened, the entire controversy.
And the entire fiasco about Prime Minister Modi's trip to Lakshadweep, and we all know what unfolded after that. Joining us also is Ahmad Azaan. He's a former Vice President of Maldives. Sir, thank you very much for taking time out. Mr. Azaan, how are we to see these developments, sir? They come on the backdrop of the fact that India extended, as my colleague rightly pointed out, an olive branch to Maldives. The President of Maldives was here wining and dining with top Indian leadership. 24 hours, less than 24 hours later, we hear of the government in Maldives trying to review some very strategic partnerships with India. How is India to read these developments?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. As Aditya rightly pointed out, we have the history of politicizing the India-Maldives relationship issue. As we see that President Muizzu inherited this India Out campaign, and after that, I was predicting that after the elections, the Indian elections has been concluded, and in Maldives also the parliament has been concluded. But there are forces in this party which Muizzu inherited from President Yamin that are mostly anti-India, and it's not only anti-India, and I would say it's like xenophobic forces there. So President Muizzu just visited India, and as you said, after 24 hours in the parliament, they're trying to review these strategic agreements. But I would say this is just again politics, because in Maldives we have a culture of going behind one party when they come into power of the other party as well. But I don't think this is acceptable at this timing.
Right, but sir, this is politics, but it does play into the psyche of Indian-Maldivian ties, which haven't done really well in the past 8 to 9 months. It started with those comments from some of your sitting ministers on Prime Minister Modi's and some rather gory comments, come to think of it, not so very nice comments on Prime Minister Modi's Lakshadweep trip, and it has come to a point where now you're reviewing some very strategic partnerships. And what are these partnerships? Let me quickly run our viewers. These agreements are hydrography agreement. It is a dockyard which is being built by India's grant. This is the Dornier aircraft, which my colleague fears may soon be replaced by a Chinese aircraft. It does look like it's going beyond politics, sir. It's actually affecting relationships with India and Maldives, and it's not in Maldives' interest at all.
Yes, it's not in the Maldives' interest at all. And if you see, like the past 2 months, it was India who delayed, who helped Maldives with this government. There was a debt to be paid last month, over $50 million, which has been delayed because Maldives government requested. So likewise, Maldives is not in a situation where they want to dig past and affect our relationships, even to go after their political rivals. These kind of strategic agreements, if they review it, because this is state-to-state secret agreements, which involves a lot of strategic interests as well, which cannot be publicized, in parliamentarian committees and all. So what I see this is as a political show, but this is going to affect the relationships. I think this is the time that Maldives need to sit down. And I took it very positive when President Muizzu visited, and India has been very hospitable, very patient with Maldives currently. But this is not a good turn, I would say. I agree on that.
All right. Aditya, we were going back to where it all started. India has had traditionally very strong ties with Maldives. In fact, Maldives, by the way of its revenues, come from Indian tourists who visit Maldives in large numbers, and they haven't done so in the last 8 months. And we've seen the outreach that Maldives has made to Indian tourists to please come back, because they are heavily dependent on Indian revenues. These latest developments, what are we expecting Muizzu to do? President Muizzu, what should he be doing at this point in time to allay some of these doubts and fears in our minds as citizens and in government's mind that we remain a close ally and not just, it's not just a word play, it goes beyond that?
Shweta, honestly speaking, President Muizzu is only doing something that is expected of him. He's not doing anything unexpected. His government, even before it came to power, had a very rabid, a very, very anti-India stance. During the election campaign, I remember, there were Get Out India campaign that was run by President Muizzu and a lot of his colleagues and partners. In the last 6 to 8 months, there have been, should I say racist, should I say communal statements that have been made by at least 2 of his deputy ministers in the government. And since then they have been silent, but still they have been provoking, and that led to a social media fiasco, which finally led to a massive not going to Maldives campaign that the Indians really launched. Of course, many would blame the Prime Minister Modi that he visited Lakshadweep, but that wasn't really the trigger. The trigger was the two ministers of Maldives actually making those atrocious statements against India. Immediately after that, we had the first visit to China by the Maldives President, and of course, talks with Turkey as well. And he's doing simply what he's known for. His anti-India views are very much clear and in public. And secondly, replacing India with China. He thinks that that is strategically going to help, the interests of the Maldives people. But history tells us that certainly Maldives will not be, helped. Maldives will not develop under the Chinese, repression, if I may say so, because the debt trap that has been seen, the debt trap policy of the Chinese in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, in many other places are an example. The espionage that the Chinese spying ships do in this entire region from Sri Lanka to Maldives is very much clear. And yet, the President of Maldives wants better ties with China. Only time will tell what will really happen. But on tourism, finally, Shweta, it is significant. The data from Jan-Feb this year clearly indicates that Indians who were the best tourists in Maldives, the highest tourists in Maldives were Indians. And Vice President Adib can confirm this because he is very closely related to the tourism sector. He's the former tourism minister as well. That from number 1 position, it has almost come to number 5 now, and has been number 1 position is replaced by who? Guess who? Chinese.
China.
So how long will this continue? As I said, will the Chinese be able to, gain with that momentum? I had a question for Vice President Adib. Vice President Adib, good to see you again here. I want to ask you on the tourism sector and overall relationship with Maldives and India. Do you fear that this is going to harm the economy and development of Maldives, Indians not going there, and at a time, as you rightly pointed out in your initial statement, that India came to the rescue with that statement a few days ago, and yet what we see is an insult at a time when the President of Maldives was on the Indian soil?
Yes, thank you, Aditya. Yes, also already hurting. If you see the statistics of the past 3 years, mostly June, July is supposed to be the off-season for Maldives. But because of the influx of the Indian tourists, especially after COVID, we didn't have any off-season last 3 years. But this year we are facing now June, July. The booking is low. We are hurting because there's a lot of Indian bookings has been cancelled. Indian tourists has gone down, as Aditya rightly mentioned, to fifth, and it's not been replaced totally by other markets because it was a very well-established market after the COVID. So exactly, the economy is hurting, the tourism is hurting, and as well as there's a lot of debt to be paid back. So with all this, I would say that the current government has to be more strategic, and they can't do politics. They can't do any kind of one-sided politics or foreign policy. We cannot afford to do that. So yes, it is very much hurting, and I'm very surprised to see that the Parliament today started an investigation while President is already attending India the ceremony.
I also want to know, Vice President, at this point, do you think China can really come to Maldives' rescue? There are, of course, dangers to what China gives you in form of money as packages, as rescue packages, as well as help. There is always something to be returned, and the debt trap that a lot of small countries have seen, including Sri Lanka, things that my colleague massively and discussed at length as to how with China, it's never a one-sided relationship. If they help you, they ask you something in return. Do you believe at this point Maldives can do without India's help and friendship, that China will eventually be able to, and Chinese tourists and China will be able to replace India out there for you? How important is India to Maldives right now? And what should the government be doing to better those relationships? What are you hoping that the government will do next to ensure that the fears that the two countries have right now, those fears are placated?
Yeah, as Aditya rightly mentioned, history tells us that for Maldives, even if there's any budget crisis, any other even climate crisis, water crisis, India has been always there. And historically, it is only India that has given budget support, prevented us from going bankruptcy, and as we know, we are going towards like the where Sri Lanka is going. And already President Muizzu has tried last 6 months with China, but and China is not a country that gives budget support or this kind of assistance. So I would say for Maldives, Maldives has to go with India. We have to learn from what Sri Lanka has gone through, and it was only India which bailed out Sri Lanka, even with all those circumstances at that time. So strategically thinking, President Moise and the government should be focusing more on the building relationship with India. We have President Modi has been elected for the third time, and India is going towards a 5 trillion economy, and India is becoming a global leader, and we are neighbors, and India and Maldives will be together. There's no going far away because we are
I
neighbors and we will stay
absolutely.
together.
Absolutely. Hopefully, we'll be together. Hopefully, President Muizzu has learned a lesson from what other countries in South Asia have to face by the way of a debt trap. And hopefully, the relationships will get better. We'll keep coming back to you. But Vice President Ahmad Azaan, thank you very much, sir.